that's the problem with our dominant leftist hegemony, our culture that we have, is that they are desperate for you to worship them. They're desperate for you not to worship them per se, but to worship the institutions and idols that they believe are sacred. And those are ever changing, but there are some constant kind of threads through their, perpetual revolutionary faith that they espouse. When the original Jurassic Park came out in the 90s, it was, the left was really content to just talk about how science is and man's attempt to control science and everything. And it was done, the book Jurassic Park, Crichton, the author of it, was a kind of a rather conservative fellow, I guess, in context of that time. But he, it was skeptical of man's ability to use scientism to control the world. And, of course, that has continued to shape that franchise. But it's just interesting. I saw an article about how they were concerned of that, the two main characters, the age difference between the main male protagonist and the main female protagonist, who had a love interest in the original Jurassic Park movie. It was too patriarchal. There was too much of an age gap or something. And so they had to correct it in this final film when they, brought those characters back together to say, make sure you put a line in there where the older male protagonist says he's going to follow, and he's going to follow the female protagonist wherever they go. And they do this stuff in very overt ways. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything really in one level, but they're desperate to always try to preach and preach and preach. They spend so much of their time in Hollywood creating scenes and images and symbols to make a point, right? To teach a lesson, How can we use these characters that you became a fan of as a child or a younger person? How can we take these franchises and use them as object lessons to sell our revolutionary faith, which is egalitarianism by force, right? That's how they think. That's their framework. So all these movie franchises, that's their first line is, okay, every scene we do, how can we use tokenism? How can we use some kind of ham-fisted egalitarianism? How can we do this heavy-handed preaching in every scene we have, using characters that people have fallen in love with before they were used in such heavy-handed didactic ways? That is not a sign of a society, cultural dominant societal narrative that's very strong and relaxed and stress-free. If your worldview is very stress-free, then you are not going to be pushing your little preachy lessons in every scene as your main focus. You're going to focus on telling good storytelling. But people complain today, man, the movies are never as good as the originals. Man, these franchises are never as good as the originals. They're always derivative. They're always trying to point back to something from the 70s or 80s or 90s or whatever, always trying to just get a glimmer of the energy and charisma of those older films. And it's just an interesting part of human nature that you can't, it's very difficult to escape the cultural hive mind narratives and feelings of your time. It's very difficult to make a story with the charisma and the charm and the whimsy of another period, another era. Not to get into a nostalgia that everything's better, because that's not a Christian approach. The Christian approach is to say everything's not better from the past, that we have to go better, that the best is yet to come, that the best in history is ahead of us. That's what Christianity teaches. That's what Jesus' first miracle in Cana was about. It was about the best wine was saved at the end, not the worst wine that kind of masks over because you've been drinking at the party. Maybe you don't notice the worst wine is brought out at the end, as the tradition was in ancient society. No, Jesus brings out the best tasting experience at the end of the wedding, which is a sign that things in history are moving in a positive, better than before direction when we imitate the project that Jesus has for us in shaping humanity in a more beautiful direction. But you see in movies today that they're just pale imitations of the original of what they're trying to cash in on. And it's because they have a weak hegemonic worldview that they're imbuing their storytelling in. They're not focused on confident storytelling. They're not focused on compelling character development. They're focused on, please accept my worldview. Please, you plebes, you people who are in the masses of the movie theaters, please, you have to be catechized to accept the egalitarian leftist worldview that I believe is desperate for your attention and adoration. We desperately want you to imitate the values of our religion. Please, we're going to use every little character you like as a shadow puppet or as a vessel for you to worship the religion that we adore. And you just can't make good art like that. That's called propaganda. So even when you have artistic elements in films today and movies and books and whatever, when you have that kind of heavy-handed propaganda laced through it all, it ruins the artistic effect of a good experience to challenge you and take you out of your normal state and make you have a sense of childlike wonder like the original Jurassic Park film did. You don't get that in the new ones as much because they're just trying to imitate an era where the hegemonic narratives of the time were much, much more confident, much, much more stress-free. They didn't feel the need to sell themselves. Please accept our worldview. Please accept this or that. They didn't have that preachy energy, that desperate, weak loser's energy. But that's what Hollywood has today. That's what the news media has today. That's what TV has today, by and large. And so that kind of trickles out into a culture that says, man, this is not, much, this is nothing to aspire to here. Have you noticed how Hollywood's lost its luster, to say the least? People used to have, we could aspire to this or that, or this kind of level of charisma and energy and electricity, right? And this is where the action is, that energy, right? That things were bubbling up. And whether it was a facade or not, it's totally gone now, right? All these late night shows, all they do is preach their sad political proselytizing. The movies, they inject their proselytizing in every single scene. And you're like, get over yourselves. Just tell a good story for goodness sake. But they can't do it. And so when you imitate that kind of culture sense making, it's going to trickle out in low self-esteem for the whole society. If kids are born in a culture when they're young and they're watching movies that have low energy, weak tokenism, weak patronizing, insult, egalitarianism, when they have that kind of slop, then they don't have any kind of role models or storytelling to inspire them. Now, obviously, we can supplement with older tales and older books and legends and myths and films and so forth to help our kids along the way. But it's certainly something that if you're not doing that, if you're just going along with what the dominant culture feeds your kids and grandkids, they're not going to have that motivation to have chutzpah, to have charisma, to have a ambitious attitude, to do great things, to do wonderful things, to discipline themselves, to go through struggles, to overcome challenges and obstacles. And it's important for us to build that kind of culture parallel from this falling apart, dying culture, so that kids can have, and they can have something to aspire to. They can want to be a cowboy or a space traveler or a whatever. They can want to be great role models. They can be inspired by fantastic storytelling that takes them out of their ordinary, life and brings them into fantasy or whatever it is that can inspire all kinds of wonder and imagination, and that they too can use their imagination. But instead, we have this escapism of leftism, this kind of virtual morality where you're supposed to hate, not just escape from your life for a moment in a storytelling, but to live in perpetual fantasy, to never want to accept your body as is, to never want to accept your nation, to never want to accept your family, right? To never want to accept boundaries, never want to accept the word no. You can't have that. I'm sorry. That kind of infantilizing has become this new virtual reality, this new virtual fake morality that's 24/7 trying to get you out of your body, out of your nature, right? Out of your context. You can't walk outside. You have to stay inside, watch Netflix 24/7. You can't trust your immune system. You have to get products that don't work to protect you from disease. You can't eat natural foods. You have to eat stuff that's, lab created or whatever. This disrespect of natural, healthy living, of appreciation for your body, appreciation for your family, your place where you were born, respecting your roots, not being rootless and detached, caring about the community in which you've been living in. Those are things that we can practice, but they will be practiced against the current, against the flow of the river, right? We'll be swimming upstream to do it, but it's worth it. It's worth it because good culture is worth building and preserving and inspiring for those around us. And it starts with good art, starts with a good story, starts with wonder. And we can be that every day. We can embody that every day. We just have to take the time to step away from imitating the low energy insecurities of our dominant, falling apart old culture and be bold enough to have charisma and energy for good storytelling, good, beautiful, interesting new characters to develop, new insights, new inspirations, new wonders to behold. That's our desire. That's my desire.